Hello everyone, Tokyo Drill 5 here, back from a long holiday break. And in this video I'm going to discuss the top 10 hardest levels in Castlevania. Now for the source of the video, I'm just going to name the hardest levels from all the mainline Castlevanias, and I'm excluding all the Metroidvania kind of games like Symphony of the Night and Dawn of Sorrow, Aria of Sorrow. I'm pretty much sticking with the traditional Castlevanias that are just level based, and we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the list. In the number 10 spot we have stage 5 in the first Castlevania. Now it makes this level very hard, especially the first time playing the game. It's a bit of a long level. It's got a lot of enemy types, but this is the first level that has the night enemy type. They take a ton of damage. They throw axes at two different elevations, which can sometimes be hard to predict. And the main highlight of what makes this level so hard is the final hallway leading to death. Now death itself is already like a tough enough boss for that level, but in this hallway you have two knights, two back-to-back knights, and you have Medusa heads at the same time. So you're trying to traverse this long hallway, trying to defeat the knights at the same time while avoiding Medusa heads, and it's just very complicated and hard to manage. Your first time going through the level, that's probably the spot you're going to get stuck and die a good majority of the times. Again, that hallway is really the highlight of what makes that level extremely hard. In the number 9 spot, we have the Laruba Mansion in Castlevania 2. If you don't know the name, it's just the last mansion before the castle, before you fight Dracula. Now, this mansion itself is very tricky because unlike the other mansions, it has a lot of dead ends. Like there's really only one way you can go to get to the end of the mansion, but it also has kind of multiple paths, but some of the multiple paths end in dead ends, which makes it very tricky and annoying because you got to do a lot of backtracking. And also too, there's a good amount of invisible platforms. This game loves invisible platforms, whether jumping through blocks or being able to go through blocks. And this mansion just, it could be tiresome, especially when you keep hitting these dead ends and having to backtrack over and over again. And then on top of that, you have the one of 3 bosses in the game that could actually do damage to you. Actually, it's Carmilla, and I feel like that's the only boss in the game that probably will put up any sort of fight besides Death or even Dracula. She pretty much rotates around the screen and drops flaming teardrops at you. But again, the mansion itself is very maze-like, has a lot of invisible platforms and dead ends, and for a first time playing through the game, could be very cumbersome. In the number 8 spot, we have the Inner Halls in Castlevania 3. Again, I got a lot of these names online. I didn't know the levels had names like that, but this is stage 9 in Castlevania 3. What makes this level extremely difficult is it just has a lot of very tricky parts in it back to back. Like you have a part where you have to climb a staircase that's in front of a waterfall, which looks actually pretty cool graphically, but you have the bone pillars and you have these flying gargoyles that just fly up and down the screen while you're on the stairs. They're pretty much in Castlevania, most of the classic ones, when you're on the stairs, you're pretty much defenseless. So you have to manage going up the stairs, fighting the bone pillars, and then watching for the gargoyles at the same time flying through. And then it has another set piece where you're going up a collapsing tower, where it collapses in sections, and if you get caught off guard or you touch the bottom of the screen, you die. Also too, because of the way the NES is, as the tower collapses, enemies can just pop in if you're not ready for them. And also too, this culminates in the final boss fight with the doppelganger at the end of the stage, again, who is a pretty hard boss in itself. So overall, that level makes for a very good challenge in the game. In the number 7 spot, we have the final stage in Castlevania Adventure, although stage 3 was a really close second spot for this game. But stage 4 in Castlevania Adventure is a very difficult stage, mainly because it's a fairly long stage. I mean, the game itself is 4 levels, which is short, but this level just drags on. It's a very long level. It only has like 2 checkpoints, and also too, it has a lot of tricky platforming. If you're familiar with the game, you know how slow it is. So it has a lot of parts where you have to jump onto moving platforms, and also too, it has a hallway of like 3 mini bosses, which is pretty much the first boss, and they're back to back. And if you don't have a powered up whip, it could be very difficult. I do know that it's pretty much the first boss. There's 3 of them, like right in the wall. It's one of the final hallways before the end boss of Dracula. And if you don't have a powered up whip, it's pretty much hard to do. I mean, like I had to cheese it where I purposely take damage and just walk through them just to get through that hallway. But with all the platforming you have to do and all the different enemies in that hallway leading to Dracula can make for a very hard time in that game. In the number 6 spot, we have stage 9 in Super Castlevania 4. Now this one too, there were a couple of good contenders in this game, because this game has some difficult levels in it. But I feel stage 9 stands out mostly because this is the treasury with all the gold and, you know, silver and stuff in the background. What makes this level in particular very difficult is that it has a lot of platforming. We have to move quickly. It has a lot of collapsing platforms where you jump and they immediately start to disappear on you. Also, too, there's this one particular area in the beginning of the game where you have to jump off these platforms and swing, and they had this one skeleton that's in this perfect spot to just hit you and knock you down. And I can tell you that there's numerous times I played the game and forgotten about that, where this skeleton has gotten like 2 or 3 deaths on me. And also, too, it has a lot of sequences where you have to swing with the whip and land on platforms, and it has a lot of verticality where you have to fight the bone pillars and snakes too as you go up. And the level has a good length too, all culminating in the boss battle with the gold bat. But again, as I remember playing this, I remember dying on this level a lot, which is really why I picked it from my list, and it's a very difficult level. In the number 5 spot, we have Cloud Castle in Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge. Oh, it's also actually one of the cooler levels in the game too, I feel like, with the music and sound. But with this castle, what makes it very difficult is they have a lot of these mechanical ropes, which when you jump on them, they force you up in one direction or down in one direction, and if you're not able to jump off or know where you're gonna move fast enough, they could do a lot of damage. And again, it's faster than the first game, but again, he's still kind of a stiff character in that game, so managing through those parts can be difficult, as well as a lot of there's a good amount of platforming in that castle too. We have to jump on and off of moving platforms, as well as moving spike traps that you have to kind of take out and move on. So the level has a lot of areas where you have to kind of like strategize and plan your moves quick, especially with those mechanized ropes. And overall, it's a longer stage in the game, and it only has like, I believe, 2 checkpoints before the boss. And with all the enemy types, the length, all the platforming you have to do, your first time going through that level is definitely going to be a challenge. In the number 4 spot, we have stage 6 in Castlevania Bloodlines. Now this is the final stage of the game, and again, it's one of my favorite levels to play just because of all the set pieces in the level. What makes this level very tricky, especially your first time playing through it, is the beginning of the level. Obviously you go through it, it has that suddenly collapsing bridge, but then when you get to the next section, you'll notice as you progress through the hallway, you'll see the screen kind of rips and pulls apart in different sections. And again, if this is your first time playing through this hallway, you're not going to know exactly how to move and jump, because you also have Medusa heads flanking you in this hallway too. And if you know exactly what to look for the first time through this could be very challenging, because you'll just wind up jumping on the platforms you think are in one spot but are really in the other, because the screen segments in different spots as you move across. Again, it was really cool, and once you understand how to move through the hallway, obviously when you watch where your feet go, you can manage through it. But again, your first time playing through this game, you're definitely going to have a bunch of deaths going into that hallway. And also the following hallway, because as soon as you get through that and you think you've managed through that, now you're upside down. So now you're going through another hallway where you're upside down, and the controls are flipped also. So you have to do some pretty tricky platforming with reverse controls. And then all of that culminates into pretty much a boss rush from Death, all the other bosses you fought in the game, Medusa, all the way to Dracula. So this level, it's not a super long level, but it has a lot of challenge packed in it. It's a great level, but it's also very challenging. Then in number 3 spot, we have alternate stage 5 in Castlevania Dracula X. All in all, it's kind of a mundane stage. Usually when I play, I kind of avoid going through this stage at all. But the main issue with this stage is that there's pretty much 2 different ways you can go, but each way is terrible. Like, you have a top path where you go through kind of, it almost looks like a theater, but then you get flanked by 2 sword-wielding knights on each side, and that part makes this level very hard, because you have a knight on both sides pretty much tanking hits, and between the 2, you can just get thrown around. There is food right by the door when you leave, but managing through that fight is very tricky. Unless you already have some hearts and some good sub-weapons to take out at least one of the knights, it's going to be a very hard time for you. And then the bottom section, if you go that way, is a whole bunch of tricky platforming with Medusa heads. And again, a lot of areas where you could just get one hit knocked into a cliff, and it's just very, very tricky, especially your first time through the level. Although the level itself actually has no boss, it goes right into stage 6, but managing through either one of those sections, especially in your first playthrough, is going to be very challenging. So going into our number 2 spot, is going to be the clock tower in Castlevania Chronicles. Now the clock tower is the 5th stage in the game, and usually clock towers are tricky in pretty much every Castlevania, but this one even more so, strictly because, you know, as you're going up the clock tower, you have a lot of areas where these gears will just randomly jump out of the background, and a lot of them are annoying too, because like you could actually hit them and move them, but sometimes like they'll come down the stairs, you'll hit them, you could stop them, change their direction, and go to another stair. And like these things in one section of the level, they just kind of pop out all over the place. On top of that, there's certain areas where you can get hit in the cliffs, get knocked into spikes and killed. And the gears itself, especially in that one section, they just come out from everywhere and they kind of push you and knock you into different spots, and it can be tricky navigating. And also too, working your way up to the boss, which is the werewolf, can be a very hard boss because pretty much just throws stuff at you, but I swear this werewolf throws crap at you with such accuracy, it's frustrating. I know I died a few times getting there and a few times on that boss. It's definitely gonna give you a run for your money. Now in the number 1 spot, finally, we have the Tower of Execution in Castlevania 64. This level is ridiculous. The game itself already has its own challenges because of the tricky camera angles and kind of grabbing onto ledges. But with this level, they throw in a whole bunch of platforming you have to do, as well as traps all over the place. You have the classic swinging axe blades you have to avoid. There's also different arenas where you have to fight bosses, working your way up, and you just gotta go through it's pretty much a flaming tower of just traps. And there's also, because Castlevania 64, you have to have a ton of platforming, which normally isn't bad in the Castlevania, but in this game can be very tricky, especially grabbing and pulling yourself up on ledges. And this level also has a lot of verticality too, so you have to like work your way to the top of the tower while avoiding all of these traps, doing all this platforming, and just defeating all the enemies too. Overall, it's going to be a very, very overwhelming experience the first time you played the game. I know when I first did it, I had tons of trouble and died a whole bunch of times and plowed through a lot of my health items. So anyway, that was my list for top 10 hardest Castlevania levels. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. You gotta like and subscribe, and have a good night. Thank you.